Hi, everybody. Welcome to your lesson that's all about adaptations, okay? Today we're learning all about the different things, both behavioral and structural, that an animal or another organism, even plants, can do to survive and thrive in their environment, okay? So an adaptation is something about an organism that allows it to live and reproduce, that's the thrive part, effectively in its unique environment. And so this could be something structural or physical on its body that has some sort of modification, like webbed feet or sharp claws, large beaks, wings, feathers, fur, scales. All of these things are on the body of the organism that allow it to perform a certain task so that it can survive and thrive, reproduce offspring in its environment, okay? So there are also types of behavioral adaptations. Behavioral could be something that is learned, or it could be something that the animal is born with, or plant. So instinctive would be what they're born with. So birds just know how to migrate. They don't have to be taught, they just know. Bears know how to hibernate. Same thing. Building a nest, or a spider building a web, okay? Or plants turning to the sunlight so that they can perform photosynthesis better. You were taught this in 7th grade, okay? So these are all things that are instinctive for organisms to be able to survive their environment. Now, there's also things that organisms do that they've learned, that they've been taught how to do, probably by their parent, like using a tool, learning a language, walking, playing versus fighting. These are things that are taught, okay? So let's look at this picture here, and let's determine what are some physical or structural adaptations that we can see here. You can pause the video and take a good look and see what you can find, but I'll name out a few. First of all, we've got webbed feet. Okay, webbed feet. We've got long, skinny fingers. These long, skinny fingers are going to help this animal with climbing. The webbed feet are going to help the animal in water. So we can assume that this is an animal that spends quite a bit of time in both places, okay? We've got hooks on the edges of these fingers, on the ends, to help them climb trees, little suction cups here on the feet, again, probably to help them be able to stick to the trees and scurry away from predators, okay? These are just what we see here in the screen, but remember that structural adaptations can be found on any organism, okay? I like to talk about the cheetah because I feel like the cheetah is just the best representation of 100 different modifications or adaptations. They are the only cat that doesn't have retractable claws. That's to help them grip the dirt. As you know, cheetahs are the fastest land animal, so that would help them with that. They've got a super long tail for helping them to balance while they turn. They've got black stripes down their face to keep the sun out of their eyes. They've got big eyes to help see better, big nostrils to help breathe in the oxygen and while they're running. Tons of structural adaptations there. Now, plants have structural adaptations too, right? They've got these leaves, and those leaves perform a really important job called photosynthesis. And you know this, you know that photosynthesis is how plants get their energy and that they're able to survive and then thrive, okay? And we just mentioned before, behavioral, how they turn towards the sunlight, right? They can grow their roots way down deep into the soil. Vines can climb up trees so that they can reach the top of the canopy and get light. Desert flowers can stay dormant for extremely long periods of time to wait for the rainfall. All of these are behavioral adaptations for plants, okay? So when you hear behavioral, I don't want you to only think about animals. Plants can do these things too. Okay. Now let's talk about genetic variation. Okay, so variation, this is an important word. Variation means that there's a variety of different things, okay? So in this situation, there's a variety of different genetic information, genetic material. So within a population, there will be a variety of organisms of the same species. So, for example, in this group of deer, we see that there's different sizes. One might be a little darker than the other. One might be have a better ability to hunt, or not hunt in this group of deer, they don't hunt, but another ability to find food, okay, than another. One of them might be have a stronger immune system than the other, making it more resistant to diseases. So even though they are the same species, there's still going to be some genetic variation in them to make them different from one another. For example, I have two sons. I've got one son that is fair skinned like me. He's got blue eyes, he's got freckles, he's got brown hair. His little brother, though, has more olive toned skin. He's got dark eyes, he's got blonde hair. Okay, same mom, same dad, but they look and act completely different from one another. There's genetic variation within my own household, and I'm sure there is for you in yours as well, okay? So mutations aren't all bad. They can be helpful. They don't have to be harmful. They are natural. Okay, differentiated survival. This is those best adapted to survive and reproduce. So over time, the genetic variation that we see, those traits that are really good, that are really going to help, those genes are going to be passed down to offspring and offspring and offspring, and they're going to become more common in the population. So for example, if blending into the environment makes them survive, then they are going to live long enough to have offspring and then pass down their traits to that offspring. When this happens enough, the offspring will eventually have all of the traits that are best useful at helping them survive in their environment. Okay, so if we look at this, if this animal was living in a grassy or wooded environment, what do you think would happen to this deer? Would it live long enough to pass these traits down to an offspring? Probably not. It would probably be picked off by a predator pretty quick. However, if this deer were living in, say, a muddy or snowy area, would it be able to live long enough? Maybe so. Maybe it would be able to blend in. And an animal that were, say, all brown might stick out, and they would be picked off by the predators first, allowing this one to live long enough to reproduce those offspring, okay? So animals that are not adapted well will probably die off. They are not going to pass off this trait to an offspring. Speaking of which, when we look here at this situation, we see that the variation that naturally occurs within a population will start to make changes to that population. If we see here in this picture, we've got variation. We've got just a couple that are dark brown, but then we have predation that happens. And predators come in and start picking off parts of the population that they can see well. And those that have this random genetic mutation to be dark brown, they're more camouflaged. They're going to live longer to reproduce offspring. And over time, they're going to take over the population. Okay? This doesn't just happen only naturally, okay, but we can also do genetic engineering and genetic modification to make this stuff happen as well. So for example, this is what an avocado looked like a long time ago. See how it's mostly pit and not a lot of actual fruit in it, okay? When people take the avocados and we find the one that has like a more fruit, less pit, we find that one. We find another one like it, we start breeding, for lack of a better word, the avocados. Then eventually, most avocados are going to start looking like this. We've genetically modified the process of reproduction for these avocados to get something that's more desirable for us. We've done the same thing with tomatoes, okay? We can do the same thing with lots of plants. So for example, here we have a wild mustard plant. This is what it looks like. And depending on the variations of genes that we see in a wild mustard plant population, we can start picking those individual organisms and breeding them together to create something new. So for example, we've taken all of several different organisms from the one species that had a different stem, and we've bred them together to get a new plant. Those that had similar leaves, we bred together, we got kale. If we saw that we liked certain groups of flower buds within the wild mustard plant population, we would take the individuals from that we like the flower buds for, breed those together. Now we've got cauliflower. So genetic variation happens, plants and animals alike. It can happen naturally, or we can cause these changes to happen based on selective breeding. What we will do, what we will select to then breed together and reproduce something new.